Nick, we're in the science shed again.
I've got a joke for you.
What is it?
Well, I bought a pair of trainers the other day off a drug dealer.
When Nick says about to tell a joke, he's got this like little kind of wry smile. You can tell he's laughing at it before he's even delivered the punchline.
You're spoiling my comic timing.
Okay.
I've stolen it off my friend, Chris.
All right. Do it again.
Steve.
Nick.
I bought a pair of trainers off a drug dealer the other day.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what he laced them with, but I've been tripping all day.
Hey.
Should we get on with the podcast?
All right.
Yay.
Science shed! We're in the science shed! Science shed! We're in the science shed! Come on, Steve.
Bunsen.
Burner!
Dolly.
Machine!
Internal.
Combustion!
Why do we need
Steam!
Petri?
Dishes!
Oscar.
Base!
Isaac.
Newton!
Transplanting.
Science!
Oh, hello, Steve.
Nick, how are you?
Well, we were up in London, Guy's Hospital, again, in this lovely little spot.
More podcasts.
More podcasting. But I'm a bit late this morning, wasn't I?
Yeah, you were a bit late.
Well, yeah, there's a good reason for that.
What's the reason, Nick?
I had
Tell
some
me about the
mechanical
reason.
issues with my car.
Well, I think for people that don't know, I think your car history is exemplary. It's just full of very expensive, very well maintained machines. So I can't imagine what could have possibly gone wrong.
Yeah, I drive bangers. But this is the first non-banger that I've had. And it's the first car that I've had a proper problem with.
So this is it. So Nick's getting up. He's coming to London. He's very excited about doing the podcast. Paint the picture, Nick.
It happened at the weekend, but I had to take it to the garage. Serious mechanical fault.
Right.
When I was at my mum's house over the weekend up in Northamptonshire, put all the stuff in the boot, closed the boot. Boot wouldn't open ever again. Wouldn't open. It was constantly open and constantly closed at the same time.
What do you mean?
Well, on the dashboard it says boot open.
Yeah.
So you try driving the thing.
Yeah.
Bleeps at you every 10 minutes.
Right, which is annoying.
And when you try and open it won't open.
So you've got like a superposition. It's like the
it's like Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is my
It's
boot
both
open or closed? It's both. So I had to.
So you're trying to pull it back to science there.
So yeah, yeah, nice one.
Thanks.
So basically, I couldn't work out how to do it. In my coat, a tiny corner of my coat. So
Yeah.
I've also been cold this morning because a tiny corner of my coat is stuck in the boot mechanism. So I can't get my coat out of the car. And I can't open the bloody boot. So I took it to the mechanics this morning.
Did they just like shake their head?
We've got a great mechanic. He's like, oh, bit of a problem again with the car, Mr. Evans. So yeah, I've got annoying boot problem. Oh, we'll see what we can do. Just
right.
leave it here. I'm sure we can take the panelling off and get it open. We'll do a coat hanger job. This is how he speaks, by the way. He's a great guy called Mike. Mike Mattingly Motors of Southampton.
Little plug there for Mike.
Yeah. He doesn't do the internet though. It's a lot of mechanic,
But other people in Southampton might need automotive repair, and now they know a good person.
Absolutely. Right. Go and see Mike. He's great. I think he's got plenty of work on. Anyway, so that's why I was cold and also late this morning, because I had to take the car to the garage.
All right, so we talk about some science.
Yeah, let's get on with the podcast.
Nick.
Steve.
How you doing?
I'm all right. I'm just...
Do you know what happened this week?
What?
So we have this thing in my lab.
Sorry, I got distracted.
All right, what are you distracted by?
Because there's people in the next room.
There are.
And they keep threatening to come in.
But they won't.
They won't.
We'll just podcast them so
Maybe
hard.
we can get them to sit down with us. Anyway, I was interrupting you, Steve. You were about to say something.
So I work a lot with. We got a lot of microscopes in my lab, right?
Yeah, that's
and
your job.
one of my bugbears that I have is bugbears.
Bears.
I have multiple bugbears.
We've talked about you being a bear, haven't we?
This might be on a different podcast.
So tell me about your bugbear.
So one of the things
another class of bear. Apparently, in the gay community amongst bears, there's another class of sort of subtype of bears called otters.
Oh, I've heard of that.
So
in fact, you've told me about this. Yeah,
they're not quite as hairy.
You seem a little bit very interested in the gay community, Nick.
Well, I am interested in the gay community. I went to Iceland last year to
Reykjavik,
Reykjavik, and it coincided with a party called Bears on Ice.
Right.
Which is a big gay bear party when they all go to the Blue Lagoon and have
naked.
A big pool party. No, they're respectable, nice people. They just go there in their swimming trunks and just have a few drinks, and a guy plays some DJ songs.
Yeah.
And actually, no, this is another coincidence. A friend of mine in Australia, Colin Gaff, he's DJ. He he DJ'd at Bears on Ice the previous year, but he wasn't there when I happened. So we just happened to rock up by me just accidentally. But we were staying in a sort of Airbnb sort of place.
Yeah.
And in the next room, there were these two Northern Irish bears.
Right.
One was definitely a bear.
It's
big, huge, bearded man.
I just imagine.
But his boyfriend was a sort of didn't look very bear-like.
Yeah.
And then I found out subsequently from my friends who are bears
in the community
that he was an otter.
So an otter. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So microscopes.
Right. Sagging back.
Some people would have like a strong segue.
Bugbear. You're bugbear. Yeah. So
bugbear.
I was wondering whether there was another subgenre of bears called a bugbear. What would they be like?
Well, I'd imagine they'd probably be quite small.
Smaller. Maybe creepy?
Like irritated easily. Maybe.
Or they would irritate easily. Oh,
yeah.
Anyway, in the context of your microscope, what was your bugbears do?
So one of the things that we get a lot of images. I get like we talk about science and we show images that come from the microscope.
Yeah, pictures.
Pictures. And one of that is a synonym for images. Yeah. And one of the things I get, I always ask for a scale bar on my images. Right?
Well, you need to have a scale bar on your
That's
images.
right, Nick. You do. And I have a thing in my lab. I'm like,
that's a bugbear of mine.
We have a colloquialism.
Is that your bugbear?
Massively.
Oh, good.
But we have it in the lab, right? This is my kind of colloquialism. I say, you have to put a scale bar on any image you show. If you don't, I get to punch you in the face.
Oh my God!
But the thing is, if I miss one, they all get to punch me in the face. That's what I kind of tell them, right? And obviously, I don't really punch them in the face, but it's a kind of like a kind of like an intellectual face punch. So no, I've said this.
Did you forget a scale bar?
No, but I did punch a student in the face.
Oh my God!
So I was at this
conference.
You be
saying this?
I was at this conference.
Are we going to put this on there?
It was an accident.
You accidentally punched someone in the face?
Actually, so I'm at
just turning around with a closed fist, swinging your arm around. I'm terribly sorry. It was a complete accident.
So I was at this conference on Monday with a PhD student of mine, and we were coming back.
This was in America again?
No.
Oh,
this is a different conference. This is a conference it was by Heathrow, so far less glamorous than New York. But I was coming back, and we were coming back on the tube. Through London to get to King's Cross to go back to Cambridge, and as the Circle line normally does, it like judders, and she kept flying, and she just flew into my fist, right?
So it's kind of like Baldrick in Black Adam,
exactly,
running into Rowan Atkinson's
But anyway, so I came in yesterday, and she's got like a proper black eye.
Oh my God, Steve! Are you serious?
I'm serious.
You've punched it.
I literally punched my student.
Are you saying this story now as a cover story?
And I've been on record many times saying if they miss a scale bar, I will punch them in the face.
Oh my God!
So what do I do, Nick? I've got to have a culture. I've got to get out. Actually, she was very good about it. It was an accident. But this is what happened. This is what happened.
Holding your fist.
I was just standing there. I was
standing there with a fist, bracing your arm with a fist
out at arm's length with my elbow locked.
And she just happened. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the train stopped and she staggered forward, and her face just connected with my fist
in exactly the right way. Yeah.
So, just going back to reality.
Yeah.
How did that happen then?
So she just kind of lurched forward.
Where was your fist?
It was on the pole of the tube.
If your fist hadn't been there, she would have just smashed her face off the pole.
Maybe something like that. That's my argument in the law court. But to the rest of the lab, this is what happened: is we went to a conference, and then someone came back with a black eye, she didn't give. She gave a presentation, or she gave a poster. And I've just got to double check that hopefully there's scale bars on it. Otherwise, I am in a court of law. I'm going down.
I've already reported you while we've been talking about it.
Thanks, Nick.
Don't like autumn.
Don't like autumn. Why not? Don't like
It's the season of death.
The season of death, and which is correlated with Donald Trump being elected.
Oh, why do you have to bring that up again? Everyone's talking about Donald bloody Trump, and it's depressing every time it's mentioned.
I tell you what, should we cheer everyone up by talking about some science?
Yeah.
Hooray!
Science of the past. Pulled on your month, got some pole in your glass. I didn't have the internet, which is a Game of Thrones, but still I had some fun with any shit like telephone.
Nick.
Oh, Steve, I've been reading a really good book recently.
Really good book.
Yeah,
What's
it's
the book?
an autobiography of a chap called George Gamow. Have you heard of George Gamow?
I haven't heard of George Gamow. Who's George Gamow?
So it's called My World Line. So George Gamow, he was a mathematician and physicist, theoretical physicist in the early part of the 20th century. And he's famous. He's not one of these people who's won a Nobel Prize, but he's famous for doing stuff like discovering quantum effects. One of the things he discovered was alpha particle emission.
Oh, cool.
Radiation.
Helium nuclei.
Exactly.
Yeah.
An alpha particle is two tiny neutrons, two protons, and they shoot out of an atom. But in classical physics, people didn't really understand how that could happen energetically.
Right.
So he applied quantum, the
Theory.
new quantum theory to it, and basically it's a tunneling. So it's a probability effect.
Right.
The energy comes from quantum physics, basically.
It's not deterministic.
Yeah, I don't understand it, but he was involved in it. And he's more famous.
So we should do a quantum course.
Maybe we get someone who knows about it.
I teach it.
Do you really?
I teach quantum
You're a
mechanics.
chemist.
Well, the quantum the quantum mechanics for chemists. I
So you're a
teach.
poor man's quantum.
Terrible, very, very poor man.
No, that'd be interesting. But anyway, he discovered that, and he also later in life he's famous for publishing a series of books called the Mr. Tompkins series. Have you heard of them?
I have, yes.
There's a famous one called Mr. Tompkins Goes to Town.
Yeah.
And the idea is it explains relativity by imagining a world where the speed of light is much slower.
Right.
Like instead of, what is it?
So all of the relativistic effects become...
Instead of 3 billion meters per second, it's like 30 meters per second or something.
Right.
So they all become obvious to people in everyday life.
Yeah.
But anyway, this book, it's classic. There's so many stories in it. Well, there was one thing he talks about. He's kind of like sort of a wit and a raconteur and a bit of a farceur, joker and a trickster.
A guy that you like to probably go for a
guy
pint
with a sense of humour, man.
Do you think it would have been good to...
So many good stories in this book. Pardon?
Right. Do you think it would have been good to like have as a colleague?
Yeah,
you would like to go for a cup of tea in the faculty lounge.
Yeah, he's a bit off the wall.
Right.
He could get you in trouble, I reckon, if you hung around with him too much.
You like wake up with a few bad hangovers.
So there's a few interesting stories, right? We could maybe spread this over another podcast as well, but I just want... Give
me one.
Well,
Hit
one
me.
of them...
I'm excited.
So he talks about his first... the experiment that made him a scientist.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you at the end whether there's anything that happened in your upbringing that sort of tuned you in to wanting to do science.
Right.
And for him, he's talking about his early life in Russia. He's a Russian guy.
Yeah.
In Odessa, right? And that's annexed by Russia now. It used to be in Ukraine. And he talks about one day his dad bought him a microscope, and he wanted to try and find out. He was going to church, and he wanted to try and find out. He'd heard this thing at church. They said that the bread turns into the flesh of Christ, and the wine into the blood. So what he did was he decided to he took this microscope home and to try and work out whether this was correct. He did an experiment. So he says in the Russian church, I'll do it. I'll do his accent in this kind of...
you don't know what he sounds like.
No. But he's a Russian dude, but he's a provincial Russian.
Right.
So let's translate it to England. So I'll do it in a provincial English accent. Right. So in the Russian church, during communion, the red wine and the bread dropped into it, turning the blood and flesh of Christ our Saviour, Jesus Christ. On one occasion, when the priest gave me an ounce of transubstantiated wine and a crumb of bread on a gold-plated spoon, I kept the piece of breadcrumb in my cheek and quickly ran home and put it under my microscope. For the sake of comparison, I had earlier prepared a similar piece of breadcrumb soaked in red wine, so I had a control.
Excellent.
Control
experiment. You need the controls.
Right. Looking into my microscope, I could see no difference between the two specimens.
What does that tell you?
The texture of the two pieces of bread was exactly the same and quite different from the texture of a tiny piece of my skin, which I cut from the end of my finger. Well, this is what happens in Odessa. It's getting annexed, sometimes communists.
So you're actually reflecting the changing political landscape with your accents.
Well, look, the colour of the sample I'd taken home from church was still reddish, but my microscope was not strong enough to recognise individual blood cells. Thus, I had only half proof. But I think this was the experiment which made me a scientist.
Wow.
What do you think of that? He had a couple of controls.
That's amazing.
He had a negative control, and he had his flesh. He had his skin as a positive control. He was only a kid.
That's very impressive.
So
do you think
for
that's
all of
true?
you budding scientists out there,
I
think my feeling is the quality of your science is determined by your controls.
I agree.
What you're comparative. Science is just comparing one thing with something else.
The only difference between science and larking around is writing it down.
Anyway, was there anything, Steve? Did you ever do anything like that?
So I did. I cut open my finger to get some blood to put on my microscope in a similar kind of way. I've still got the scar there with a scalpel.
Did you do that? How old were you then?
How will you get your first microscope? 5, 6?
Oh my god! So you cut yourself just so
It had a scalpel in the kit, and I think you're supposed to like slice something. So I just sliced my finger open.
That wouldn't happen these days.
Yeah,
You wouldn't
probably
get a
not.
Scalpel.
Yeah, it's probably really unsterile too because it's probably like sat in my drawer, getting covered in fluff. But yeah, I did that and got some blood and put it on my microscope to have a look at that. But was there an experiment that really? It was never an experiment. I would say I definitely really enjoyed finding out about the world. I definitely in science class and things finding out how does that work. Particularly, I like the periodic table. Really liked the periodicity. Like why do things change? The fact that as you move along, it's so beautiful, right? That every nuclei increases its atomic mass and the neutrons and electrons. I really loved all of that.
I suppose the periodicity of it's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
you would get the repeating properties of elements as you go up, and people didn't know why that happened until Mendeleev came along.
That's true, and then you also had these examples of like technetium, right? So technetium is a element for people that know the periodic table, which is in the transition metals. And actually, when they first assembled, like you say, when Mendeleev assembled the first periodic table, there was a gap in it. They said, "Oh, this doesn't make sense." So there should be an element, but they couldn't. But they hadn't discovered it at that point.
Well, that happens with lots of elements in Mendeleev's periodic table. He left spaces. That was his genius.
Yeah. But technetium was, in fact, I think has been discovered in the natural world now. Yeah. But it was the first one to be artificially made.
Oh wow!
Right? And
so that was
they were like, there's a gap in the periodic table where this element should exist, and we can't find it in nature anywhere. Yeah. So they had to go and whack it in a high energy accelerator.
I think it's. I don't remember doing any. I think I was interested in nature and the natural world. I was into bird watching and things, which is not quite the same. But by the same token, I was interested in like the meaning of life and.
So you're a philosopher.
I think maybe I missed my call. Well, I was really into the planets and
planets. Oh yeah,
and all
love
the
planets,
stars,
dinosaurs and planets. Stuff. Every kid is into dinosaurs and planets.
So. But I never did an experiment like he did, and I think, does that make me less?
Do you reckon he did? I reckon that's like I think that's made up.
There's loads of other good stories.
It sounds like quite a bombastic gentleman. I'm sure he can just like you could probably retrospectively apply meaning to things when you're just being a kid,
Another story from this book is talking about, so again, he's in Odessa.
Yeah.
Hanging out, growing up. And at the end of the First World War, the Russian Revolution happened in, was it 1917?
I think so, yeah.
So there were battles, and constantly other countries were involved. Yeah. Crimea was constantly being invaded, taken by the communists.
Tumultuous times.
Taken back by the Tatars and other people. He's constantly flipping between being communist and imperialist. And he talks about a story. One of his friends was a professor of physics in Odessa. He's called Igor Tam. Have you heard of Igor Tam?
The name sounds familiar.
He won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1958. So he goes to the local village, Igor Tam does, when Odessa was occupied by the communists, because they're all starving, they haven't got enough food. So they take a load of silver spoons out to barter for food with villagers. It's quite a dangerous thing to do. Yeah. So as he was doing this, he said the village was captured by one of the Makhino bands. So these were kind of some of the group of people who were against the communists. So they saw his city closed. They brought him to the Ataman. The Ataman was a bearded fellow in a tall black fur hat with machine gun cartridge ribbons crossed on his broad chest and a couple of hand grenades hanging from his belt.
Okay, baddie.
Yeah.
Sounds like a baddie.
And then he says, here we go. You son of a bitch, you communist agitator, undermining our mother Ukraine. The punishment is death. But no, answered Tam. I'm a professor at the University of Odessa and I've come here only to get some food. Rubbish, retorted the leader. What kind of professor are you?
I've heard this story.
Mathematics, says the Ataman.
Yeah, this is great.
Then give me an estimate of the error one makes by cutting off Maclaurin series at the nth term. Do this and you'll go free. Fail and you'll be shot. So Tam could not believe his ears. The problem belongs to a rather special brand of higher mathematics. Under the muzzle of a gun, he worked out the solution and handed it to the Ataman. "Correct," said the Ataman. "Now I see you really are a professor. Go home." Who was this man? No one will ever know. If he was not killed later on, he may well now be lecturing on a higher mathematics in some Ukrainian university.
That's good. I like that.
Up there.
That's important, right? Just in case, you have to barter for your life by solving.
Again, it could be just a load of old balls, couldn't it?
I hope to not think so. I mean, Euler is another famous mathematician that lost his life in a duel over a woman. I think that was the.
And there's other things which I find quite reassuring as well, right? Because this is a guy who was the forefront of, theoretical physics. Yeah. And he's publishing a paper, right? So he's doing a paper on quantum physics, and he's talking about something called pilot waves. This is how all to do with quantum tunneling and things like this. And he has to do an equation. He has to solve an equation in order to progress his paper, and it's the expression the square root of 1 minus a over r to the dr, whatever that means. I don't even know what it means. Didn't know how to do it, so he went to a Russian mathematician. And this is apparently dead easy. If you're a mathematician, it's like bread and butter. It's like elementary maths. Yeah. So he wrote the paper after asking for help with it. And when it appeared, the other professor was acknowledged, and he became a laughingstock because they realised what the extent of his contribution was.
Right.
But it just reassures me that even people at the very forefront
are like, I don't know how to do that.
Sometimes they just don't know how to do stuff.
That's great.
Really easy stuff.
Well, I think there's a real strength in a character to ask for help, right? It's to say, like, yeah, I don't know how that works. Help me.
Are you good at doing that, Steve?
Am I good at asking for help? I am if I don't know. If I particularly with our biological collaborators, I don't know any biology, Nick. I don't actually. Do you know what the difference is? Me? The thing is, like, I don't know how hard some things are, right? So sometimes we have conversations with our collaborators, and I'll say something like, "Oh, can you purify that? Or can you send us some more of this or something?" And the answer, because sometimes it's really easy in biology, like, "Oh yeah, no problem, that'll take a day or a week." The other day I was like, "Oh, can we purify this complex?" And my collaborator turned around to it and went, "No, Steve, that's a Nobel Prize if you can do that." So it's kind of, you just don't know relatively how difficult some things are.
I think so. There's another good example of that recently in work we're doing this work where we put a drug in a tiny particle, a nanoparticle, and then we give it to some cells. Yeah. The cells eat up the nanoparticles. Yeah. And then something gets switched on that we measure. So you measure the thing getting switched on when you put the thing in the nanoparticle and compare it to when you don't use the nanoparticle. So you want to try and find out whether there's a difference in the effects. So I just want to find out, right, with the cells, how much of that drug is there in the cells afterwards. How much? So I'll give you some cell lysate. Tell me how much of that thing there is in the cells.
So you know the molecular mass of the just mass spec it.
Okay, well I'll give it to you then, Steve.
Yeah, do it.
I gave you. If you may remember that I gave you some samples some time ago. Do you remember that?
Maybe.
Yeah, you've forgotten that. Yeah.
I've forgotten that.
Shall I do it again?
Do that. But so. I have lots of people give me samples, Nick.
I'm only joking.
I'm serious. We should do it. Send it to me. We'll mass spec it.
Oh, right,
that's the way to do it.
And then we got proof of this.
As long as you know the mass of the drug. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really easy.
But I don't think it. But people have told me it's not straightforward. I've had people say
they do mass spec.
People say they're doing HPLC. You can lyse the cells, yeah.
So I'll give you an example. So we're looking for specific. We're taking human spinal fluid in the lab, and we're purifying it via a special compound, and then we're trying to determine the protein composition. So we're doing on beat mass spec, and then digestion on the beat.
Proteome eggs.
Exactly. Well, no, because we all want to care is there one protein there or not. So I'm saying it's a background of a complicated mixture, right, and we can see a single protein.
All right. Okay. Tell me how you want the cells. I'll give you them.
Give me the lysate. We'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll tell you if it worked.
All right.
If it's really hard, then I'll say, Steve, you haven't sorted it out.
Do I get? But if I don't want to be acknowledged, then be a laughing stock. So maybe I shouldn't help.
What's annoying
Nick?
Hello.
Do you know, I was just reading the BBC website, and there's something in there that I think you might find interesting. So people have found a star, right? It's called Kepler 11145123. It's a good name, huh?
Kepler 11145123. 4, 5, 1, 2, 3.
Do you know why it's a
Did I remember the number then?
No. It would have been impressive. Do you know why it's that's an interesting star? Because it's the astronomers claim that's the roundest object in the known universe.
Oh, that's fucking annoying, Steve.
It's
the roundest object.
Yeah.
You mean the most spherical object?
The most spherical object, yeah.
And how far away is Kepler?
That's a good question. It is... Doesn't say.
How do they know it's the roundest object?
So
Are you just getting this from the BBC website? This is annoying me as well. You're just looking at the BBC bloody web. What kind of scientist are you? You should be looking at the original literature. You just found a website on the BBC, just randomly gone, I'm the science podcast information. Let's look on the BBC website.
That is exactly what I did.
Doubly irritating.
Yeah, it's really round. It's twice the size of the sun, and its radius doesn't deviate from the poles more than 3 kilometers.
What expressed as a percentage?
3 kilometers of the total, the maximum deviation away from the sphere on something that's twice the size of the sun.
Oh, right.
So it's very flat.
Well, I'm really fascinated.
Science shed! We're in the science shed! Come on, Steve.
Bunsen.
Burner!
Dolly.
Machine!
Internal.
Combustion!
What do we need?
Steam!
Petri.
Dishes!
Austin.
Space!
Isaac.
Newton!
Transplanting.
Science!
Do you like Ferrero Rocher, Steve?
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit cliched, but yeah, I do. Yeah,
I feel it's cliched.
it's a bit Christmassy though, and we're getting close to Christmassy. We're going to do a Christmas special of the Science Shed.
Coming up.
Yeah, which we haven't recorded yet, but I'm sure will be good. We're going to do the video again, like we did with the Nobel special. Did you like that?
I did.
It was quite fun, wasn't it?
It was really good fun, and we should do a Facebook Live thing as well, shouldn't we?
Yeah. So if people like what we're doing, they should follow us on social media and share and subscribe and spread the joy of the Science Shed around. How would they do that, Nick?
You can tweet me on @the_Evans_Lab.
And I'm Steve the Chemist on Twitter. So please get in contact and all that social networking jazz.
Yeah.
And we'll keep doing this.
Absolutely.
All right. Ferrero Rocher.